Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here, and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today I'm taking a look at this, the 1/48th scale North American F-86 F-40 Sabre from Airfix. So join me as I get stuck inside the box and see what this kit is like. So on the outside of the box we can see that we have two Norwegian aircraft in formation flying over what appears to be the fjords. On the left hand side there are two different indications that there are paint schemes. So we've got a Norwegian one and a Japanese one by the looks of it, and we have an item code of A08110 down the bottom. It is 1/48 scale, so a little bit bigger than what I normally deal with, and if we move on to the thin edges, the information there is exactly the same as we've seen on the front. So we will flip over to the longer edges. We have some warning information in multiple languages, but then we do have a officially licensed product sticker from Boeing. So naturally, Airfix have spent some money getting an official license for this one. If we move across, we have a Cartograph logo. So the decals inside should be manufactured by Cartograph, which means they should be to a good quality. And we do have a tooling and production date on here. So it says that the model design and tooling dates from 2020, but this release is from 2022. So this is not the original release. This is actually the second release. And if I flip over to the other long edge, we have some information about the actual Sabre, as well as some dimensions for the kit. So it's 239mm in length, 250 in width, and there's 156 parts included. We have our two paint schemes annotated here. So the first one is a Norwegian one from the Flying Jokers aerobatic team in 1962, and the second one is a Sabre from Japan in December 1975. This boxing has sort of been a little bit received as slightly underwhelming because these paint schemes are not particularly exciting, which is why in the next release of this kit, Airfix decided to do something a little bit more vibrant, I think. So actually, I'll just quickly show you what I mean in a sec. So Humbrol paint color callouts are here if you wanted to buy them. It's a skill level 2, so perhaps not particularly difficult to build, and there are 3 flying hours. Cut those out, keep them. If you're a member of the club, you can buy or redeem kits using those flying hour coupons. However, if you're not a member of the club, please do save these and send them off to Models for Heroes so they can redeem them. So yeah, so this was not particularly exciting paint schemes. Although, you know, I bought it because I quite like the look of it, but that was one of the sort of criticisms of it from other people at the time. So the last release, actually, and I got one of these as well, I got one of these as part of a mystery bundle, came with more exciting paint schemes. So as you can see there on the box, it's the same kit. As far as I know, there's no changes other than the paint schemes. And this one has a aerobatic display team and also another American version with slightly more vibrant colors on it. So yeah, I think that's probably what they did. They addressed the fact that these were not the most exciting, which probably leads to the fact that I got this one quite cheap, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's get the box open, and we have our paperwork and all our parts. I'll look at the parts in a minute. We'll do paperwork first. Right, instructions. That's where we normally begin. Instructions appear to be to the normal format from Airfix. I will just take the transfers out, put them to one side. At the top, we have our information about the actual aircraft. There is a little mention of help or thanks down the bottom here, and a few little tips and things. So we'll turn over the page. We have a key to the different assembly instruction symbols we might encounter, and then we're straight into our step-by-step build pictures. And we start off by assembling this. This appears to be part of the air intake. We have a cockpit tub, we have chair. You can see that depending on which variant we do, there are actually different chairs. We have our paint color callouts annotated by Humbrol numbers here. We then move down to install these parts. There are decals for inside of our cockpit for the control panel. Our control column gets installed, and then we're on to more parts of the air intake. This gets glued on, and we come on down. We do actually have different parts here based on which version perhaps we're doing. Is that might be a blank what do they call it, like an engine plug so that things don't get blown in there when it's stationary. So we do have that by the looks of it, because 153, if I recall, is a red paint color. So that is interesting. We do have a pilot included as well, which is pretty cool, which means that I think we may have a raised or lowered landing gear option, but I doubt we have a display stand, which would be a bit of a shame. But yeah, so coming on down, landing gear bay parts, and then we do have the option to have gun doors on the nose, open or closed. So this is the closed option, or we can do the open option. So here you can see that they are installing 50 caliber machine guns and what looks to be their ammunition sort of belts and ammunition storage parts. So yeah, interesting that you can display the nose open with the machine guns on display. So we do that for both sides if you want. We do have a part here that needs to be removed a little bit. So this is perhaps this variant has a slight change to it compared to an earlier version. We do have air brakes. They can be closed or open. And then we come on down to what looks like more parts of the engine assembly. So possibly part of the engine exhaust. Yeah, so the engine exhaust goes in there. We come on down. We do have to add some weight, 10 grams of weight in the nose to make sure it sits on its wheels properly. It doesn't sit on its tail. We do have more parts we need to add internally. And then if we are building this up, we need to make sure we install the closed covers at this point, because they come from the inside and not the outside. Moving on down, if we're doing wheels down, however, we can install landing gear bay parts. Oh, we do have the option for drop tanks as well, but we need to open up holes for those in the wing. Moving on, more parts for our landing gear bays. And if we have the gun bays open, we need to remove part of the leading edge of the wing so that we can have that open. Moving on, wings get joined together. More parts, yeah, again, same, cut that part if you're doing gun doors open. We have more holes for drop tanks, and we carry on. So these are our leading edge slats by the looks of it. It looks like they can be positioned in a sort of open or closed position. We have the wings being added. We have our ailerons and wing tips. Tail surfaces go in. Small panels. I'm not sure what those panels are for, but they need to be installed. Perhaps there was like a photo reconnaissance version and there was a camera in the side of one of the variants, but again, that would need digging. Landing gear doors, landing gear legs. Wheels, clear part for lights. Nose wheel assembly parts. Carry on down. Still continuing with this, air brake parts if we have installed them, if we wanted them, and then we come to drop tanks. So drop tanks, it appears that there's two different kinds of drop tanks, so you need to pick the relevant one, but they look to be fairly simple to assemble, and then once they're done, they can be glued into the holes on the bottom of the aircraft, and we have like the fuel filler pipes that go onto the bottom of the wing too. And then we come to the last page, and the last page has us adding small details, landing lights, what appears to be like the heads-up display or reflector gun sight, the parts that go inside of the cockpit canopy, and that brings us onto the cockpit canopy, which then gets installed. And that is the instructions. Not overly complicated by the looks of it, and some options have been designed into the kit for lowered landing gear, raised landing gear, pilots, open gun bays. So yeah, there's quite a nice bit of variety in there. We have a stencil placement instruction. It's in black and white, not really too much of a problem. It just highlights to us where the majority of the stencils need to go for both aircraft. And then we have our painting instructions, which are printed in full color, which is what we love to see. So this is the first one, possibly a little bit more exciting to look at for a Norwegian Air Force Flying Jokers aerobatic team aircraft. A little bit more visually interesting with the red wing tips. And you can see that primarily it is a silver aircraft. Probably the one I would be tempted to do between the two. We do have the Japanese version as well on this side. Again, red wing tips, a little bit more red in a few places, but generally not too visually striking, which is why I mentioned earlier that we have the sort of other American aerobatics aircraft that was released in the next version. But yeah, no, painting instructions in full color, which is what we like to see. This brings us on to the decals. A reasonable size sheet of decals and printed by Cartograph, so they should be printed to a nice quality. We have our common stencils and things at the top here. There's quite a lot of them, so if you don't like doing stencils, you could either leave them off, or you just kind of have to suffer and bear this. We do have the ones here for the Norwegian ones. They look to be printed very nicely. The Joker playing card is printed really nice. There doesn't seem to be any registration issues. Nothing's off center. The white around the red here looks to be pretty much spot on. And then we've got our sort of checker stripes here. They're pretty decent too. The decal film isn't overly thick, and they look really nice. So yeah, generally Cartograph transfers I don't have a problem with. Although that being said, there is an ever so slight discoloration here. On this one, it might not show up on the camera, but just across here, there's an ever so slight, it's almost as if where the printing didn't quite have the same opacity, but not bad, not terrible, perfectly usable. So that's that, which means that all we've got left to look at are the parts. So here they are, they're all inside a bag, and I've not had this open yet, so this is going to be the first time for me. And the clear parts, we'll look at the clear parts first, because that's what I like to do. The clear parts come in their own little bag. There we go. So we've only got one little sprue of clear parts. Not a great deal in here. We can see we've got our main canopy part, which looks to be molded to a pretty nice quality. A little bit of sort of dirt in a few places. The windscreen here as well. The plastic feels slightly greasy, but the molding is to a really nice quality. It does look to be pretty clear. You can see through it relatively well. I mean, it does make things a little bit blurry, but you can generally see through it. There doesn't seem to be any marks or scuffs. There's not much in the way of flash. There's hardly any flash on there. So yeah, these are pretty nice. The molded canopy lines are subtle. They're not overly in your face or overly proud, but you could mask them with a sharp knife. But yeah, clear parts, pretty good. Not bad. Nothing really to complain about. Not many clear parts, but again, I don't think this kit has that many, as in, the aircraft in real life didn't have a great deal. Yeah, so let us put that down and then have a look at the rest of the parts. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 light grey plastic sprues, and the light grey plastic is something that's a little bit older from Airfix. They've been using a darker grey of plastic recently, so this tells me that this is a slightly older manufactured kit, which would make sense given that we saw the dates on the side of the box. So let's have a look at this one first. This is our main fuselage parts. The plastic doesn't feel as greasy as I've had it from Airfix before. It has a little bit of flex in it, but generally relatively dense. The details on here then, the fuselage halves, you can see we've got recessed panel lines, a few little rivet details in places if it's appropriate, but not too heavy on the rivet details. Relatively subtle. Coming on down, you can see the molding is quite crisp. There's not a great deal of flash. The lower wing surface here, this has some little rivet details in a few places. Panel lines again recessed, but not overly thick as they have been on some previous offerings from Airfix. And then the other fuselage half here as well. Again, pretty much the same kind of deal. Maybe the panel lines are a little soft in a few places, but pretty nice. On the inside, on the other side then, let's have a quick look. So you can see that the ejector pin marks are all on this side, which means that they shouldn't be on visible surfaces, which is good. However, the ejector pin marks have left some rather dirty sort of impressions. So the tooling maybe wasn't as clean as it could have been when they were manufacturing this run of the kits. But hopefully we won't see any of that in the finished build. So that's not really a problem. No detail on the inside here. There is a little bit of dirt sort of molded in on the inside, but as it's on the inside, that's not too much of a problem. Moving on then, this sprue is, what sprue is this? This is frame B. This contains our wing surfaces here. Again, it's the same kind of deal. Panel lines recessed, some subtle rivet details in a few places. Generally though, molding is pretty nice. The small details, we've got our control panels. They have some little details on them. The detailing is a little soft, perhaps not as defined as would be in more modern or more recent kits from Airfix, but still pretty good. The level of flash is absolutely minimal as well. There's hardly any flash in places. I don't think I've really seen anything. There's like maybe just a tiny bit of a mold seam along the edge here. But yeah, struggling to find flash. Next sprue then, we come on to all of our smaller parts. So this is the rear side, so we'll flick over. Wheels down here, we've got a good selection of wheels, depending on which variant you kind of wanted to do. I imagine they designed in different variants for this kit. We have landing gear legs, which are molded to a nice quality. We have smaller details, little rivet details in a few of these as well. So there's that sort of plug that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, I think that's an engine intake plug for when it's not in use. Machine guns here. And where's the pilot? There's the pilot. So the pilot seems to be kind of like the generic pilot. It is a generic jet pilot by the looks of it. Molding is relatively nice. I've seen considerably worse. My only hope is that he fits inside of the aircraft without any problems. On the back though, you can see we've got a big old hole, possibly where an ejector pin went. But hopefully you won't see that when you finish your build. But yeah, a little bit disappointed there's no display stand, because I'd love to have this flying, but I mean, you probably could make your own display stand if you wanted to. And that brings us to the last sprue. Oh, quite a few bits and pieces on here. The cockpit tub with lots of cabling and stuff there. However, on the inside, you might be able to notice there's some scuffs and scratches. I don't think you'll be able to see that in the finished build, but there are a few little scuffs and scratches, perhaps where the tooling has not been so well looked after. But again, on here, the molding is fairly crisp. The details are a little bit soft in a few places, but generally, it is pretty nice looking kit. Yeah, could be an interesting build. Interestingly, again, on the back of the cockpit tub, we've got some weird pock marks on there, which is strange. I don't think they're meant to be there. It almost looks like damage from the tooling. But I don't think that'll detract from the build. Ejector pin marks are on this side again. A little bit dirty in places, but hopefully no major issues. But yeah, not a bad looking kit. Looks like it will build up quite nice. There's not a great deal of flash, and it's not overly greasy or anything. The detail, I think the only thing I would pick up from this is that the details are maybe a little bit soft and not as crisp as they are on more recent kits from Airfix, but it's still pretty good. So let's round up. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 light grey plastic sprues in the older style plastic from Airfix. Details are good, if a little bit soft. There are ejector pin marks, but they're primarily on the rear side of parts, but they are a little bit dirty. But there's nothing here that detracts from it being a relatively nice looking kit. The level of flash is minimal, and I haven't seen any short shots or anything as I've been going through. Doesn't mean there aren't any, it just means I haven't spotted them. We had 1 sprue of clear parts as well, which looked to be molded to a really nice quality. Again, no real obvious flash, no real obvious problems with it. So yeah, pretty nice. We have our decals printed by Cartograph to a pretty good standard. One small little complaint was that there seems to be a little bit of discoloration in a couple of places, but generally a really nice set of transfers. We have our painting instructions, which are printed in full color, which we like to see, and we have 2 paint schemes included. However, they are perhaps a little bit more on the mundane side, given the different kinds of sabres that were out there. We had a stencil placement instruction and our step-by-step instructions, which are printed with elements of color but are relatively easy to follow and are well illustrated. All of that came contained within the box. And Airfix, they get some really nice artwork for their boxes, don't they? I quite like this artwork. I don't have any problems with it. I think it looks pretty cool. The Norwegian one is probably the one I would be tempted to do. So all of that then, as we discussed, this was the 2022 release. There was an earlier 2020/2021 release, which I think was for an RAF version, which would have been the first release of it. And there was the later release, or the more recent release, which featured the more exciting paint schemes, which I'll probably do an unboxing of at some point. But Yeah, how much would you be looking at paying for this? Well, at the time I was making this video, or rather the time I bought this kit, which was only a couple of months ago, this was retailing for its recommended retail price of £41.99, which is kind of in line with other 1/48 scale kits of this kind of size in the Airfix range. However, as I mentioned, they can't have been selling a great deal of these because possibly the paint scheme wasn't exciting enough, or it just wasn't as appealing to other people. So actually there must have been excess stock in their warehouse, because when we had the Black Friday sale for 2024, this went all the way down to £16.99, which is more than half price, which is an absolute steal. I've had 1/72nd scale Sabres cost more than that. So at that price, what you could potentially do, if you weren't a fan of the paint schemes that were included, you could potentially buy this kit at such a cheap price and then get yourself some extra transfers from another manufacturer as an aftermarket accessory and do your own paint scheme. So an absolute bargain for the price that I paid for it. But with that in mind, it is a little bit disappointing that it wasn't as perhaps popular as it could have been, given the fact that it was so cheap at a sort of clearance kind of price. And with that, I think I'm going to call this one here. What do you think of this kit? Is this something that you'd like to have a go at yourself? And let me know down in the comments if you thought my assessment and review was fair. As always, a quick shout out to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen, and if you'd like to join them, take a look at the links in the description. There are other ways to help support the channel as well, and again, full information is below the video. The best way to support the channel for free, though, is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Last thing to say, though, is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I will see you on the workbench again next time.